I wrote because no one would listen. I wrote, and eventually it wasn't enough. I could have all these thoughts, but that's all they were. How is anyone to know I exist if no one can hear me? Alas, my peers' silence was loud enough to know that they had no interest. Of course, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I wrote about how I felt. I wrote, and eventually it wasn't enough. No matter how I colored each word, I still feel as I did before writing. If anything, I felt worse. But I told myself I was reflecting through the ink of my pen. That was enough to keep me burying myself deeper into my emotions. Alas, I grew tired of my own thoughts. Of course, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I wrote fiction, for I could no longer live in the inner reality I created. I wrote, but what did I write? Well, I wrote short stories in an array of genres: fantasy, sci-fi, mystery, drama, anything, you name it. But I could not write my own tale anew. I could not rewrite what was already set in stone. Of course, after the realization of this, I stopped writing for a while. I sat idly, waiting, but for what? Eventually, I would find out. A new chapter unfolded before my very eyes. A chapter of acceptance, not in the form of my peers, but of a friend. Taken aback by this newfound relation, I consulted my inner thoughts through writing. More and more days went by. I soon forgot what writing even was. I was only concerned with having fun and making memories while I could. I would share my stories, and unlike before, I was cool. Yes, the notion of that is rather silly, looking back on it, but it was vital for my person. More and more days went by. Unlike before, I made a return to writing, but only because I was expected to, and so were my peers. Unlike before, their judgment was anything but silent. Their scrutiny did not need to be any louder. Unlike before, their input didn't matter all that much to me. I only cared about what those close to me thought. Summer would come, and just like any other summer, it was a time for joy. Or so I thought. A new chapter unfolded before my very eyes, one with a much darker tone to it. A chapter filled to the brim with indescribable affliction. A chapter that I thought I could rewrite, or so I thought. Long gone were the days of peace. Back were the days of old. Too soon did those days leave. Too soon did I return to huddling away in notebooks. Too soon did I forget the friends around me. But how could I remember those around me when I was grieving for those who weren't? Not dead, but gone. I wrote and grieved and wrote and grieved. Words that were synonymous, words that were one and the same. It didn't do me any good, but it gave me something to do. In all of this, I lost track of time. I grew older, and the older I grew, the further I grew apart from those around me. Friends, rivals, adversaries, it didn't matter. None of it mattered. I had my thoughts, a pen, some paper, and some much needed quiet. That's all that mattered. That's all that ever mattered. Countless months went by. I would receive faux and silent critique from colleagues, as I did not want to rid of the very little I had left. They knew I'd be well enough for that job alone, as I did too. A year or so later, things started to slowly rebound. I wrote as a way to collect myself, and I still write for that exact reason. I write, but not because that's all I know. but because it's something I need to do.